Hi everyone, welcome back to Farrand on Film. Today I'm bringing you a review of a new musical film called Tomorrow Morning. Now, Tomorrow Morning is released in the UK in cinemas on the 9th of September and it's released again in the UK on DVD on the 17th of October. So I'm bringing you this a little bit early and thank you to the team for allowing me to do so. Now, I wasn't aware of Tomorrow Morning as a musical. I consider myself to be a pretty big musical fan. You may have, if you're a fan of the podcast, if you're a fan of the channel, you may be aware that myself, Ollie, and Holly, quite a while back now, did our top 10 musicals over 2 episodes. So there's a lot that I'm aware with. There's a lot that I'm aware of, I should say. But this wasn't one, so I was quite intrigued when I got the email to sort of check this one out. So from the director of the West End hit Fame, which I believe he directed the TV special. This stunning big screen adaptation features new music and lyrics from the show's original composer, Lawrence Mark Wythe. So West End and Broadway stars Samantha Bax and Olivier Award nominee Ramin Karimloo headline a superb ensemble cast with Dame Joan Collins, Omid Lilly, Henry Goodman, Harriet Thorpe, Anita Dobson, and the X Factor's Fleur East completing the star-studded lineup. In this timeless universal story, the clock ticks down to two monumental days in the life of Bill and Catherine. Two perspectives of one story collide across time, seen in a parallel yet 10 years apart. On the eve of their wedding, as they embark on life together while coping with a life-changing event, and after a decade of marriage, as they wrestle with the impact of their divorce on their young son. The musical was first seen in London in 2006, the New End Theatre. It was presented at Victory Gardens Greenhouse Theatre in Chicago, where it won a 2009 Jeff Award for Best Musical. Further productions have also been given, including an off-Broadway production by York Theatre in 2011. It was seen in Tokyo in 2012, Portugal in 2014, in Seoul in 2012 to 2016, plus productions in Germany, Austria, Italy, and Australia. Productions in Mexico, Rome, and Russia were cancelled or postponed due to COVID-19. So it's pretty big. It's had a substantial, I would say, following, especially since 2006. But again, to kind of reiterate what I've already said, I wasn't familiar with this at all going into it. And it kind of caught my eye because, you know, it said it was a musical film. And I thought, well, I like musicals and I'm surprised that I've not heard of this. So to kind of begin with, the one thing that I did was I looked into the musical. I tried to figure out what it was about, who was in it, if there was any kind of notable people in it before then watching the film. And it looks as though there's been significant changes made to the material from its theatre run. So if you're a die-hard Tomorrow Morning fan, if you went to go and see the original run and you're very much looking forward to this film, I would imagine this might be the thing that puts you off it, in that there's been very significant changes. I'm going to go through some of those now. Just pull this from the Wikipedia page. So unlike the stage production, the lead actors will portray themselves at both stages of their lives a decade apart, with Samantha Bax taking on the role of Catherine and her younger counterpart Kat, and Ramin Karimloo playing Bill, formerly known as Jack, and his younger self Will. Now, in the stage show, they had four people doing that. They had four actors, two from 10 years ago, two from now. Whereas in the film, it is very much just Samantha Bax and Ramin Karimloo, who I'm going to come to in just a second. Also, unlike the four-person stage show, the film will feature other characters, including Catherine's friend and confidant, played by Fleur East, her mother Joy, played by Harriet Thorpe, her grandmother Anna, played by Dame Joan Collins, and a cameo appearance from comic star Omid Lilly as Bill's father Dariush, or Dariush. Apologies, can't pronounce that. So, kind of going into my review then. The first thing to mention is these two main stars. So you've got Samantha Bax, who is known for being in Les Mis, the film. She's been a judge recently on the All Star Musicals program that's been on ITV, and she's currently playing Elsa in Frozen. Ramin Karimloo is someone that I wasn't familiar with. Now, Ramin Karimloo, his voice to me is very similar to Adam Pascal. You may be aware of Adam Pascal. He was in Rent more prominently as Roger. And he then went on and was, you know, he had a brief appearance in School of Rock. He's done a lot of his own music. He did some Darren Lynn Bousman stuff with the Devil's Carnival. He's more recently been in Hawkeye because when they did the sort of Avengers musical, he provided the voice to save the city. And what I mean by his voice is that it's very raspy. There's a lot of kind of rock tones to it. There's a bit of a falsetto in there as well. And if I closed my eyes, I thought I was listening to Adam Pascal. Now, that's no sort of degrade on Ramin Karimloo at all. Adam Pascal is one of the best voices, I think, underrated voices as well that's out there. So I was quite pulled in by that. And if you're not familiar with Ramin Karimloo, he was in Les Mis on stage and Phantom of the Opera on stage. He's done quite a bit more so on stage than he has done in film. Now, obviously, the idea is that we start this film with these two together and we flash back to the marriage, we flash forward, I should say, to the divorce and things like that are happening. Now, I will be honest, the flashbacks are very, very jarring at first. I didn't realize that we'd flashed back or flashed forward. Now, the thing that really took me out of it and was really jarring is you see Samantha Bax and she very abruptly changes costume. And I was a bit like, oh, so we move forward now then. And there's a slight different hair coloring. So I thought, all right, we might have moved forward. That's a bit of a weird edit, but we might have moved forward. And I kind of forgive that. I kind of let it go. But then when we see Ramin's character, Bill, or Will, he has a beard and long hair. And then suddenly, in the next shot, you see him without a beard. And I just thought, is that a massive continuity gaffe that no one's picked up on? But actually, it's a flashback. And that hadn't been established before that point. And it really took me out of it for a second because I just thought, this is bizarre. I even actually rewound the film to go back and make sure that I wasn't making it up that he had a beard in the previous scene. Now, I teach my students, or I mention it at least to my students, about the Kuleshov effects of this idea that we as an audience subconsciously make a relationship between a number of different shots that we see. So, for example, if you saw me now and then you saw a spider and then you saw me screaming, you would assume that I'm scared of the spider. But with this, I see a guy with a beard who I recognize, and then I see him in the next scene, same voice, same hair, but without a beard. And I just think instantly, and that relationship between those two shots is bizarre. It was almost like I didn't realize he had a twin brother and there was a different person in this. So that was a bit weird. That was a bit strange for me. Now, what kind of took me out of this is that it's very televisual. Now, I'm aware that critics in the past, like Mark Kermode uses it a lot, that the term televisual is becoming to be a bit of a critique. And I am using it in that way because ultimately it's not high-end TV drama. It's not this cinematic TV that we've had recently. It's more like it looks a bit like a soap in certain aspects. It looks like it should just be on ITV 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening in place of Vera because of the way that it's been shot. Now, the next sort of production bugbear or technical bugbear is the syncing up of the soundtrack. Now, there are certain points, certain scenes where the actors are singing and the soundtrack isn't syncing up to the voices or the way that the lips are moving and the way that they shot the film. In addition to that, the tuning and the mix of the soundtrack is very unnatural. And what I mean by that is there's a point, like all the stuff at the beginning where they're singing the titular Tomorrow Morning song with Samantha Bax and Ramin Karimloo's character, I can go along with that. I think that kind of fits. That's okay. Just realize I lose my hand every time I do that. Blackout blinds are needed. And the issue where it kind of comes up most prominently is when Fleur East's character sings for the first time. Now, I like Fleur East as much as the next guy, okay? Really enjoyed her on X Factor, all that kind of stuff. She did an amazing rendition of Uptown Funk, if you've not seen it. And she has a good voice. But the way that they've done the production on the soundtrack is that they've sort of turned the auto-tune up a little bit. They've put a little bit extra backing track on it. So when she starts singing, it just comes across as extremely unnatural. Whereas in a bigger budget musical, a more polished musical would have it where it fits in and blends in better to the narrative, where all of a sudden, this woman who is at the time in a bridal shop isn't just automatically singing with what sounds like Mark Ronson stood behind doing his laptop playing his DJ set. It comes across as quite bizarre. It's very clear that the cast were picked for this project for the theatre experience, the singing voices, because the majority of the ensemble cast, aside from the two leads, the acting comes across as very static. I didn't want to use the term wooden, so that's why I went with static. I wouldn't say that it is wooden. I would say that ultimately there are certain points where you can tell that someone's just remembered a line and that they've repeated the line that they've read off a piece of paper. There are a couple of things, again, that feel a little bit unnatural. Some of the script feels a little bit unnatural. And I think it's a bit of a shame because I did wonder about halfway through what this would have been like in the hands of like a well-established director or with a bigger budget, or maybe some significant different members of the ensemble cast. But the two leads, so Bax and Karen Wu, are very solid. They managed to hold this material together, which again is kind of damning with faint praise a little bit. Overall, with Tomorrow Morning, I have to say Samantha Bax shines in the role, and it emphasizes her strengths in that she's very good at acting, she's very good at singing. This role allows her to do both, and it pulls her away from the kind of either obviously stage acting or stagey film acting, which you tend to get with like Les Mis. And it allows her to do something a little bit different. It allows her to show off different sides of a character, different sides of a personality that she's able to do. And I kind of appreciated that as somebody who is very familiar with Samantha Bax's work. I saw her in the West End as Elsa in Frozen when we took Ruby recently. She was amazing in that, and she's great in this. So that kind of is a positive there. And Ramin Karimlou's voice heightens the otherwise passable soundtrack. And again, I don't think the soundtrack hits as well here as it would do if I was watching the stage show. I think a lot of the songs of the soundtrack would have worked better in the stage show, whereas in the film, they just fell a little bit flat because it was bizarre seeing the same two people, in the one hand talking about how much they love each other, and then because we've flashed forward, then singing about how much they actually don't like each other anymore. It's bizarre. It's quite strange. So I don't think it's been a fully successful adaptation of the musical, but again, I can't really say that without seeing it. I'm very interested to see if anyone who's watching this video has seen the musical and can kind of tell me what they think about it. And then obviously go and check out the film when it comes to cinemas in the UK on the 9th of September and on DVD on the 17th of October. But again, I think for this one, positives, Samantha Bax, Ramin Karimlou's performances. If you're a fan of either of those, you're probably going to check it out anyway. I think in terms of negatives, some of the production elements, the soundtrack, the way the soundtrack blends into the film, cinematography is not the best, and the ensemble can be a little bit static. But other than that, I think I'd recommend anyone who's a fan of musicals to watch it, because again, it's something, if you're a bit of a completist, you're going to check it out because it's musical. So by all means, check it out, do your research, go into it. But again, if you're a fan of the musical, you're going to want to see Bax and Karen Wu in this anyway. Okay, so just to repeat, Tomorrow Morning is coming to UK cinemas on the 9th of September and will be on DVD in the UK on the 17th of October. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you've either were already looking forward to this film and still going to check it out, or you weren't aware of it and you might check it out now. If you want to help support the podcast, you can go to Offworld Tees and use the code Farrand, that's FARRAND, for 15% off your order. You can follow me on Twitter at Adam Farrand and at Farrand on Film. Stay safe, look after each other, and I will see you next time.